The Mark Pope era at Kentucky is off to a hot start as the Cats upend Kentucky. No, they are Kentucky. As they upend Duke. How did it happen? We'll tell you.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, joined today by our guy, Leif Thulin, and you're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to thank you so much for making us your first listen or watch to get this day going. You can listen to every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all the everydayers joining us, and of course, all the members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Fun Energy live show today. Thank you for those of you who are joining us here at the lunch hour on the East Coast on Wednesday. Obviously, we're going to be unpacking the Champions Classic. Kentucky coming back to edge out Duke, Kansas outlasting Michigan State. And then we'll get to the rest of the action from Tuesday night. VJ Edgecombe finally settling in a little bit from Baylor. Villanova loses again. Oregon nearly takes a costly loss late on Tuesday night. We're thankfully for them able to pull it out. But Leif, obviously we got to start with the nightcap of the Champions Classic, where the Cats of Kentucky win 77-72. Duke led this game by as many as 10 points, 42-32, with about 2:40 to go in the first half. But come back, great performance from Andrew Carr to lead Kentucky with 17 points there. Obviously, some Duke injuries factor into this game, but credit to Kentucky and Mark Pope, who get the first signature win of the Mark Pope era. Leif, what did you see out of this nightcap of the Champions Classic?
Champions Classic is so awesome.
I love it, man. It's so good.
It's the best.
Hey, quickly, let me say, while you mention that, we just they just reported on Tuesday that it has been renewed and re-upped up through 2028. So we at least got 4 more years of this bad boy.
Oh, that's music to my ears. But what stood out to me in that nightcap was Cooper Flagg was awesome, but Duke's offense looked horrible at the end of the game. They shot terribly. They shot so poorly from 3 that it turned into an ISO fest, and Kentucky's team-based offense was able to win the game late. And yes, there's going to be talk about how their defense forced turnovers. I would say Duke's lack of offense caused the turnovers more than Kentucky's defensive disrupted Duke into those turnovers. Kentucky shot the best of any of the teams at the Champion Classic. Funny story, Mark Pope said, we've been practicing with that Spalding ball all week. Well, they went 40% from 3. Duke went 4 of 23. Michigan State went 3 of 24, and Kansas went 5 of 19. Yeah. All those teams are shooting about 20% from 3 combined, and Duke and Kentucky shot 40%. But continuity is great. Continuity worked. But I felt like Duke was the better team for 35 minutes of this game. And it just happened that the last 5 were where Wart's show of inexperience and just poor shooting. I think if you look at Caleb Foster, who was truly a dare shooter, they left a guy who shot 40% from 3 last year wide open numerous times. Con Knippel cannot shoot much worse. And the result was Cooper Flagg trying to do too much. He was spectacular, otherworldly. I was at the Utah Jazz game, and I watched him make a play where he soared for a rebound, went the other way, called for a pick and roll, threaded the needle, Malach dunk. And I said, no one on this court between the Jazz nor the Suns, because Kevin Durant wasn't playing, can make that play. And he's 17 years old.
Yeah.
And that was the takeaway. But then you watch the end of the game, and it's going to be muddled for a lot of people by the end of the game. He slipped. He lost the ball. There was a missed box out. And veteran intangible plays and continuity won the game for Kentucky. So I think Kentucky's on top of the world right now with Mark Pope. Arkansas might be a little bit worried, and that makes it all the sweeter for Kentucky. And Duke, nothing to really worry about. You're going to shoot better. But maybe at the end of the games, close games, I wonder what their answer is going to be. Did they miss Jeremy Roach there?
I thought about that. Say more on that, Leif, because I wanted to go there. I'm right with you.
I mean, Jeremy Roach gives them someone who is a confident 3-level scorer. I think that Caleb Foster and Tyrese Proctor are both better basketball players than Jeremy Roach. But I think in this sort of game where there was lack of shooting ability, they couldn't shoot a ball and they needed to create something late. A guy who is really good in pick and roll at all three levels is Jeremy Roach. That was a game in which you saw the two shortcomings of their guards. They're huge. Duke's enormous. They never play a lineup smaller than 6'5". Defensively, at times they were stifling even against an offense as prolific as Kentucky. They didn't. Kentucky shot 40% from three, but when Duke was in the half court and not allowing transition baskets, they were great defensively. But what they didn't have is someone to create shots for themselves and someone who knocked down open threes. And I thought Jeremy Roach was the type of player who could do so. But overall, I think Foster's a better player than Roach. I think Proctor's a better player than Roach. But they showed where their warts were there. Colin Knippel went 4 of 20 from the field.
Yeah.
Or 5 of 20, excuse me. 5 of 20 from the field. And you just don't see that very often. But in that type of game, to have a chance to win late, like, look, Duke was up most of the game. And then at 72-72, they had the ball. Like, you liked your chances there, particularly shooting as badly as you did. So my reaction was good for Kentucky. I think they solidified themselves as a top 15 team. I think Duke is a top 2 team that played badly and still should have beaten the top 15 team on a neutral site.
Those are all great takes, Leif, because I think a lot of people are going to rush to judgment of Duke after this. And I think we just saw 2 really good basketball teams on Tuesday night that, as you said, are both top 15 caliber teams. And so I don't want to rush to react to any of that in terms of like, oh, Duke's not what we thought. No, clearly this is a great Duke basketball team. And I think because of how high level they are, we're going to tend to end up picking apart the things that are like, it's not what makes them a bad team. It's what are the potential warts that might stop them from winning a national championship. So if we're nitpicking anything with Duke, it's at that level, not on this isn't a good team level. I want to go back to the Cooper Flagg side of things, because I think people, that's where a lot of the conversation is going to be. As you very well said, Leif, kind of early in your remarks there, we saw both sides of the holy cow, this dude is only 17 and doing this, and the yeah, he's 17, so he's going to do this, right? And we saw both of that in this game. Obviously, for those of you watching on YouTube in real time, you can see on the box score there just what a great game Cooper Flagg had. 26 points, 12 boards, contributed a couple other stats as well. But then there were those 2 turnovers late. There was the missed box out, as, if Duke had got that rebound, they still have a shot to win this basketball game, because that miss made it still a 1-possession game. It was just a 3-point deficit at that point, but not getting it. And then Kentucky's able to close it out at the line. So I think that's a real thing that we're going to have to watch this season. But good grief, he's phenomenal. Now, Leif, the point guard thing is something I thought a lot about Tuesday night after this game was over, because I think part of it is Cooper Flagg is out here trying to make plays a little bit. And there isn't a true point guard in terms of somebody like a DeJuan Harris at Kansas, somebody else that was in the building that night. And I know you're not a big DeJuan Harris truther or anything like that, but just I wonder if that's part of where Duke might not be as high level this season as they potentially could be from like a ceiling standpoint, is if they had somebody that was a true distributor in that sort of way.
You know what the craziest thing is? Kansas against North Carolina, and I'm not trying to poke in a wound here. North Carolina and Kansas played each other. And I was thinking to myself the whole time, no matter how much momentum's on the side of North Carolina, I trust Bill Self and DeJuan Harris to get a good shot. It's not necessarily that Harris will take the shot. Like, usually you want the ball in the point guard's hands because he's going to score. No, it's that he's going to make the right decision and feed the post properly to Hunter Dickinson. I honest to goodness was thinking to myself, Kansas at the end of that game against Michigan State executed wonderfully once again, and they scored it with Dickinson. KJ Adams made his free throws. That looked like an experienced team that hadn't meshed yet, but at the end of a game, they know their roles and they have, hey, I know that Dickinson's supposed to get the ball. I know I'm supposed to feed the ball to him. And defensively, we're going to play better than we have through the course of the previous 38 minutes. Kansas has done that in 2 of the last 3 games that they've played, or the first 3 games of the season. Duke, this is the first challenge, the first time that they've actually faced competition that athletically can hold a torch to what they can do. And for the most part, they stood up well. They couldn't have shot worse, and they still should have won the game. So that's good. Now, the bad part is the role definition wasn't there. Cooper Flagg, if there's any knock on him as an NBA prospect, which I'm doing a podcast right after this about his NBA prospects, is he's not necessarily an offensively gifted creator of space.
Yes.
He's just a tenacious competitor with great size and fluidity, right? Like, he's not an Ace Bailey shot maker, and that's what they asked him to be. So yes, I think they needed a point guard, and yes, I think they needed a more veteran guard. So I wondered if it would be Proctor, because Foster was really struggling with confidence. He was bricking free throws. His threes were not even remotely close at big junctures, too. I think of Foster on that one possession where he shot 2 threes. If those of you who are listening to this watch the game, he had 2 threes that were both miles short from the exact same spot. They were up 4 at that point. I think that could have been up 7 with momentum. And the last thing I'll make a note of before we have to head to a break is Kamen Malalac was maybe the guy, when he was in the game, they're unbeatable at times because you cannot score. Well, he gets cramps, and I think what he does on the offensive side goes unnoticed. He's raw as can be offensively, but he gives you a million second chances. So no matter how badly you're shooting, he gets the offensive rebound. And on the other side, you have to view him as a lob threat. So it allows for guards to get better shots. So I think when he was out, the offense also struggled. I'd have considered playing Isaiah Evans for shooting. I'd have considered playing Darren Harris for shooting. And I also think Mason Gillis probably could have played more, considering that Sion James also left the game with an injury, because Mason Gillis shot 46% from 3 last year and is a rugged rebounder. So if you're already missing bodies, I thought the substitution patterns were interesting.
And Leif, I think you brought up a couple other important storylines there that I want to mention before we go on. Is obviously we're going to need to watch this Sion James injury for Duke to his shoulder. Like, is that going to be a thing, or was it just for that night? Because he did not come back in the game after that. Obviously, Duke has had some cramping issues early this season, to the point that John Shire talked about it. And so, which, by the way, man, just props again to Andrew Carr. He showed his veteran capability of getting Malalac out in space and then being able to drive past him a time or two down the stretch there. Really impressive. But also, Leif, I was Duke not using that depth. Isaiah Evans, a top 10 player in this 24 class. Darren Harris, a top 40. Neither of them touched the floor in this game. And to me, this was always going to be part of the issue for this Duke team, right? They've got these, if I remember correctly, it's 6 total high-level freshmen, so highly rated. So they were going to need to bring in experience to help lead the way, right? These incoming transfers like James and Gillis and Brown, for example. And then what's going to happen? Well, either some of the freshmen get edged out, like on Tuesday night with Evans and Harris, or some of the transfers don't play because you're beholden to playing those freshmen whom you've brought in. Either way, you've got an issue on your hands. So I think that's just something is going to be a storyline we need to watch with Duke this season, is not only the role definition, but how does Coach Shire handle these minutes? And as you said, the rotations, Leif. So that is definitely something to watch for. All in all, man, I'm so happy for Coach Pope and Kentucky. I know there were such a big subset of the Big Blue Nation fan base that was out on the Mark Pope hire. I don't hear them chirping at all anymore. And so I kind of threw a shot at them on Twitter on Tuesday night, but I think ultimately, man, this is great for the Kentucky fan base after losing Coach Cal and now losing, use whatever word you want there. But now you get Coach Pope, and man, things are off to a great start in Lexington. We'll see how things continue. Now, Leif, as you said, we got to get to the first game of the Champions Classic because, man, Hunter Dickinson basically willed Kansas to a victory to start things off on Tuesday night. We'll get to that in just a second. Right after I tell you about Game Time. Folks, college basketball, it's here, man. The atmosphere is so great of a college basketball game like Tuesday night. Great stuff. The anticipation of what's going to happen, you never know, especially a game with some of these high-level dudes. Like, there were 70 NBA executives in attendance, front office folks on Tuesday night. That's crazy. And so you just never know with that level of talent on the floor. Well, great news. When you're getting tickets this season, you can use Game Time to help you get these great tickets at a great price. price. They've got a new feature called Game Time Picks that helps curate, making it easier to save money when you get sports tickets, but also concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. So whether it's the Game Time ticket coverage, their lowest price guarantee, or the panoramic views from your seat in the app, Game Time's got you covered. How about Bama at Purdue Friday night, Leave? That's going to be incredible there in Mackey Arena. You can get in the door a little bit expensive, but $120 is the cheapest ticket I found. All sorts of great options for this top 15 matchup. So go take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, folks, we're back, and we're going to move now into the first game of the Champions Classic, where we had Kansas knocking off Michigan State 77-69. And basically, Leif, this was a game where Kansas could not do much of anything outside of Hunter Dickinson basically willing this team to victory. Dickinson finishing with 28 points on 13 of 21 shooting, plus 12 boards and 3 steals and a block. Look, I have not been a Hunter Dickinson apologist, but without him, the Sparty are waking up on Wednesday morning champions.
Yeah, I mean, the stat, I believe, was Hunter Dickinson and Flory Badunga were extremely efficient in the first half. And at a point, Kansas was 1 of 18 aside from those two. 1 of 18. Layups wouldn't go in. Threes wouldn't go in. Nothing. Hunter Dickinson was automatic. And defensively, he has his warts. Jackson Kohler scored. He hit threes. But Hunter Dickinson's value offensively becoming the fulcrum of any offense. At the end of a game, you can feed the ball to him. DeJuan Harris can run the ship. Defensively, he's surrounded with enough good players. Kansas is the team at the end of a game. If they're in it, I feel very confident about Bill Self, DeJuan Harris, Hunter Dickinson. And Zeke Mayo is really good too. And he didn't play very well, but he added rebounds and assists. So Kansas is about role definition and compensating for – actually, I should rephrase this. Kansas is really good. They may be the best team in the country. Their 2 warts, if you ask me, are egos, managing egos that comes with role definition. AJ Storr, Zeke Mayo, Rylan Griffin. Who of those 3 is going to play? Diggy Coit, all these guys. And then the other war is, can they manage to compensate defensively for Hunter Dickinson's weakness and deficiency defensively? Other than that, I think they're the best team in the country.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we saw that Dickinson defensive incapability exploited on Friday night, right? Like Hubert Davis attacking that over and over and over again. One of the things that was interesting to me, you talked about managing those egos. For the first time, we had a switch in the Kansas starting lineup. Zeke Mayo had been coming off the bench, as had AJ Storr, with Diggy Coit being the guy in the starting lineup. And he hadn't done much in Kansas's game on Friday night against North Carolina. So we see a switch there where Coit now came off the bench on Tuesday night in favor of Zeke Mayo because he'd been balling in Kansas's first 2 games. As you said, didn't have a great game in this one from a scoring standpoint, Leif. And I very specifically say that because only 6 points on 2 of 8 shooting, 0 of 3 from 3. But I think what you said about Zeke Mayo is so critical here because the best basketball players to me are the guys that figure out when I am not capable of doing like what's usually my biggest contribution, how am I able to still help this team? And this dude adds, as you said, 10 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 turnovers with that, and a steal. And so I love that Mayo still found ways to contribute to this game, critically important for who they are and what they're going to do. DeJuan Harris, doing what he typically does, 11 points, 3 rebounds, 6 assists, and 0 turnovers. And it's just that level of guard, as you said, down the stretch is going to make me feel comfortable and confident at any moment in this thing. Leif, what do you make of the fact, going back to the starting lineup, of AJ Storr comes in, Wisconsin's best player last year, and has come off the bench in every game this season and only played 12 minutes in this one?
I'm actually a big fan of it because my biggest concern about Kansas coming into the year, I had them ranked number 1 in the first week preseason poll. I had them number 1 this preseason poll, was can Bill Self pay so much for AJ Storr for Zeke Mayo, for Diggy Coit, who admittedly I hardly knew about. I knew who he was, but I was like, oh, like 10th man. No, he started the first 2 games.
Same.
Everyone talked about Shaquille Moore more than him, and you haven't seen him. So my biggest concern was legitimately, can he manage the Caleb Love side of AJ Storr? And what I mean by that is Caleb Love was the player of the year. AJ Storr on his good nights looks like the player of the year in the Big Ten last year. Like on his good nights, okay, Zach Edey excluded. I apologize about that. Zach Edey excluded. He looked like the player of the year on his good nights. And then you watch his bad nights and he shoots Wisconsin out of the game. Well, Kansas doesn't need him to be such a good player, but they certainly don't need the negative side of that either. So my concern was AJ Storr. Could he handle not playing as much as Rylan Griffin, who fits better in terms of he's a 3-and-D guy by nature. He shoots threes and he defends your best perimeter player. Zeke Mayo was the Summit League player of the year. The reason I was higher on Zeke Mayo than AJ Storr is he played with the ball in his hands as a point guard, and he could play both role as a supplementary ball handler next to Harris, play the point guard when Harris is out. And I think he's a better true shooter than AJ Storr, whereas Storr is more of a slasher. I do think there's going to be a game or two this season in which AJ Storr, Rylan Griffin, someone throws a pout fest. It's about how they can navigate egos. I used to joke that Steve Kerr had the easiest job in the world. Steve Kerr's job was coach the best basketball team ever assembled and win. All you have to do is make sure they don't kill each other, because that you got Steph Curry, you got Kevin Durant. Like that was unfair. But I realize now that maybe I was a little presumptuous. It's not the easiest job in the world because there's egos involved, especially if college
and Draymond involved.
Well, exactly. That too. But at least those were grown men. These are college kids with copious amounts of money. And I think Bill Self's biggest job this year is going to be managing ego. And the fact that he's gotten AJ Storr to come off the bench and look motivated this first 3 games, I think is the biggest bright spot of the season, because Zeke Mayo is going to shoot better. AJ Storr is going to shoot better. Rylan Griffin's going to shoot better. DeJuan Harris is going to shoot better. He hasn't even made a 3 in the last 2 games against quality competition. I know he's not a good shooter, but he's someone who can knock him down if you dare him to. KJ Adams is banged up. Flory Badunga has been a shining bright spot.
I love Badunga, man. I'm with you.
I didn't think he'd matter at all this year. I was like, well, whatever. Like, they got Dickinson. It doesn't matter. No, he's been great. It allows for Dickinson to be fresh every time he plays, and you don't lose in the minutes Badunga plays. And they played together because of Michigan State's ineptitude to stretch the floor yesterday. That allowed for it. But it was awesome. Badunga has been a shining bright spot. So you're ahead of schedule with your freshmen. Your transfers are figuring it out. There haven't been fights among them, to my knowledge. I think Kansas is the best team in the country.
Yeah, that's good. Also, a reminder, folks, on Shaquille Moore, he's actually out with a broken foot, and so we'll wait to see. The initial diagnosis, if I remember, was like 8 weeks or so on that, and I think that was back in like early to mid-September. So, we'll continue to monitor that timeline. Leif, we haven't really looked at the Michigan State side of this at all yet, and I know we need to keep moving on here in just a second, but frankly, Frankie Fiddler leads Michigan State in scoring in this game, 15 points, not a efficient 15 points. It took him 12 shots to get there, but he was money at the free throw line, 8 rebounds to go with it. And he's somebody that I think we expected to come in and really help Michigan State, and clearly doing that. It's great to see Fears back out on the court after his injury, after, getting shot. I say injury as though it's like he strained a hamstring. This dude got shot, and here he is this year back on the floor. Like, just even that is good. But Leif, I think maybe the biggest takeaway for me with Michigan State, you talked about the ineptitude of their offense. Akins, 2 points in this game. If I remember correctly, barely shot in the second half. Tom Izzo needs more from his man. And by the way, Xavier Booker, 0 points, 0 of 5 from the field. That's not going to cut it either. We got to see more from the Sparty.
Yeah, they shot terribly, and the 2 guys that were most hyped going into the year didn't score. Is that a good thing that they were able to compete with what I perceive to be the best team in the country? Like, you can spin it that way, but I think its overarching theme is they're going to be tough. They're going to be well coached, but who's going to score? Last year they had Tyson Walker to come to get them out of all their issues, and even then they were a 9 seed actually. So you find ways to contribute and battle, but I didn't find ways to score like as obvious. It wasn't like they were missing great shots. I didn't think the people shooting those shots were great shooters. I think Xavier Booker, who I think shooting like 1 of 11 right now from 3, on the season, is actually a good shooter. Like his touch is very good. He didn't shoot well. I like his shots. Akins will score in some games. I thought they had a concerted effort between DeJuan Harris and Zeke Mayo to deny him the ball. I am concerned about Fears. He can't shoot, but man, does he play with heart. And I don't think, frankly, Fiddler's that great. Like I know he's the shining bright spot if you look at a box score in this game, but he doesn't look the part to me. Doesn't create space, doesn't shoot that well. So you don't have an answer there. So it's really incumbent upon Akins to score and maybe Jace Richardson, who I thought was the best player in this game for Michigan State.
And speaking of Jace Richardson, I guess part of the good news for Michigan State is you had 5 guys play off the bench. All of them scored at least 5 points. So, there's something to be taken away from that. Leif, final thing from Champions Classic, rank these 4 teams in order from best to worst as it stands today. I'm not talking about like March, just right now, Wednesday, November 13th. What do you got?
Kansas, Duke, Kentucky, Michigan State.
Same, without hesitation. That's my order as well. And I tell you, the team that showed me the most was Kentucky, right? Yeah. I feel like the other 3 teams did about what I expected them to do. Does that make sense? And then Kentucky, it was like, I thought their offense was more efficient than we had said. I know you said the second half you thought was more about Duke's offense, but good grief, I loved what Kentucky was doing defensively, some of the adjustments. And I know you weren't saying like Kentucky's defense wasn't good or didn't make adjustments, but I left more impressed by Kentucky's defense than I thought I would be. And man, I think that's just a testament to what this team's going to be able to do. And man, fun stuff. As you said to start the show, love the Champions Classic. And I'm so glad we get to continue seeing more of that. All right, gang, Villanova lost again on Tuesday night. I'm worried for Kyle Neptune's job. And boy, it's good to see VJ Edgecombe finally settling in a little bit for Baylor. We're going to talk about that and more coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about our friends at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action this season with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. How about the national champion odds right now at FanDuel? Leif, this is wild. There are 7 teams tied with the best odds at plus 1,200. UConn, Houston, Duke, Kansas, Auburn, Gonzaga, and Alabama. Next, those are all at plus 1,200. Then Iowa State at plus 1,700. Followed by Arizona and Kentucky at plus 2,500. I don't know if those have been adjusted since the Champions Classic, but man, I think you could get Kentucky at a deep discount right now if you wanted to. If you wanted to get in on that action or anything else at FanDuel, go check it out at FanDuel.com, where you'll get started again with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Okay, Leif. It is a struggle right now for Villanova, who loses at, to be fair, on the road, true road game at St. Joe's on Tuesday night, 83-76. Here's the problem, though. Even though it's at St. Joe's, they had just lost at home to Central Connecticut, Leif Thulin. And now Villanova is 2-2 on the season, having lost that game and also to Columbia last week. Leif, if there's a hot seat in the country for a head coach than Kyle Neptune's, I don't know who it is. What's wrong with Villanova, and how do they, or can they, get this thing turned around?
No, I mean they're terrible, absolutely horrendous. They lost to Columbia by 10. They were 18-point favorites in that game. And you know what the funniest part about this is? I looked at the spread just because I was like, man, they lost last year to a lot of Philadelphia teams. Like
they lost to St. Joe's last year, right? Didn't they?
They lost to St. Joe's, they lost to Temple, and they lost to, was it LaSalle? Like
it might have been.
I don't know exactly who the third one was, but they lost to 3 Philadelphia schools. And you look at maybe it was Drexel.
Drexel, yep.
It was Drexel.
St. Joe's, Drexel, yep.
And Temple. So I watched 2 of those last year. This year, I was thinking to myself, you know what? It would be pretty funny to bet on St. Joe's because Villanova is terrible. I decided not to. Decided to bet on Kansas, and that worked all right. But I kept checking the score and thinking to myself, man, oh man, like Kyle Neptune's gone. Like I was going to use the term tarmac, when you leave him at the tarmac, except it's in Philadelphia. So you leave him at the bus station wherever they were playing it, because they could not have been worse. You have Eric Dixon. You're paying him $1 million+ and he's been excellent. And that's it. That's it. And last year, honestly, this year's Villanova team's roster is not that good. I'll give him that. But last year's roster was top 10 in the country. Jay Wright had that team. They're a Elite Eight at least team. They didn't make the tournament. It's not so much about this year's shortcomings as much as they're 32-35 against D1 schools since he's taken over. That's horrible.
It's bad.
In what world does you keep your job if you're a team that expects to make a tournament once every 5 years with that? Because to make a tournament, you typically have to be 9-10 games over 500. Oh wait, you're at Villanova. You're at Villanova. You have 1 million people paying you tons of money, and you're coming back from Jay Wright to this. He's gone. He's gone. And honestly, I don't like calling for people's jobs, but he should be gone.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot underwhelm this poorly and then continue to have a job. If he makes it through the season, I'd be surprised.
Because this isn't just some rando program, right? This is a program that's won a quarter of the last 8 national championships, has been to the Final Four since then. Obviously they were shorthanded in that 22 Final Four because Justin Moore's hurt. But it's just like, I'm with you. I hate it, but it is what it is. But you would like Eric Dixon. You've got, good grief, man. It's tough. I mean, Wooga had a decent game, but struggled to shoot last night. I don't even think if Max Scholga had stayed committed to Villanova, it really would have. I mean, maybe they win one of these games, but it just wouldn't have made that much difference, in my opinion. So, Leif, that's tough. Let's go to happier news, where VJ Edgecombe, we've expected coming into the season, to be one of the best freshmen in America. Kind of a slow start, but much better against Sam Houston on Tuesday night. Baylor wins 104-67. And I think sometimes we just put too much on freshmen too early because of the things that we're seeing in this day and age from the freshmen. And sometimes you just need a game against like a Sam Houston to do this. In this game, Edgecombe finishes with 13 points on 6 of 9 shooting, 1 of 3 from 3, 10 boards, half of them were offensive, 7 assists. So 3 assists shy of a triple-double for VJ Edgecombe in his 3rd college game, plus 3 steals and a block and no turnovers. Leif, is VJ Edgecombe starting to figure this out?
I think he is. I don't think VJ Edgecombe's a great shooter.
Yeah.
So I think Baylor needs to find ways for him to do what he does best. Be a sensational athlete, a slasher, someone who can impact the game, attacking the rim and attacking closeouts. So I think a lot of it will be how Baylor continues to grow as a team will behoove him. And as he grows, it'll really help Baylor. So I think it's a symbiotic relationship, as it tends to be within one team with a crucial player. But it'll be interesting to see how he develops when playing athletes that are more comparable to his level. No offense to Sam Houston State, but they're not the level of Gonzaga's athletes or what Calipari and Arkansas provided. VJ looked better against Arkansas than he did against Gonzaga, but I think that was more because they're not as well coached as Gonzaga was. But athletically, when he didn't look like the best athlete by miles and miles, I still think he had some struggles. So I'm happy to see him settle in nicely against Sam Houston, but I kind of expect him to do well against Sam Houston State. I want to see him do so against high major schools.
Well, and we'll keep an eye out for how that goes. Also for Baylor, love their balance, man. 7 different players reached double figures on Tuesday night. Great stuff there. Norchad Omer just rolls out of bed and gets double doubles. He did that again, 18 points and 10 rebounds on 8 of 11 from the field. I love that man and love watching him play the sport of college basketball. Leif, we're running long. Let me run through a few other things and see if there's anything you want to highlight from it. Oregon survived a nearly brutal loss to sub 300 at Ken Palm. Portland, who has been terrible, 0-2 in the early part of this season. Portland should have won this game, but they literally handed the game away late. And then as soon as it got to overtime, there was no chance that Portland was going to win. Oregon wins 80-70. The Big Ten is now, with that win, a combined 39-0 at home. New Mexico continues to roll. They got a 100-81 win over A&M Corpus, which that you expect that. But what I've been so impressed by, Leif, is Donovan Dent and the start. He's off to 25 points in this game on 7 of 10 shooting, 10 assists, 2 steals for him, just 1 turnover. Man, he's been really good. Nelly Jr. Joseph has been really good. UCF follows up their Texas A&M win. They beat FAU 194. North Florida, who had won on the road at South Carolina and at Georgia Tech, unfortunately can't keep it rolling at UGA. They lose 90-77. And then Syracuse survives, and I mean survives, Colgate 74-72. Colgate had a shot at the end, but basically just lost the ball out of bounds. And so several things on Tuesday night, even outside of the Champions Classic. Anything from that you want to highlight before we get out of here?
Well, Colgate always plays Syracuse close. For some reason, they always do.
And Colgate's a solid team. I mean, they're a really good team that dominates their conference annually.
And annually, they play at least a within 10-point game, if not beating Syracuse. The thing that stands out to me about college basketball yesterday, aside from Champions Classic, was Donovan Dent. Donovan Dent had a ton of turnovers against UCLA, but he was easily the best player on the floor and cruised past a team that was ranked 22nd in the country. I think erroneously. I'm outing myself. I had them ranked 22nd. I thought they'd be top 3 in the Big Ten. I am out on UCLA. Yeah, they looked horrible. But Donovan Dent was able to attack a very good defense in UCLA and have one of those type of games where he looks like clearly the best player on the floor against a blue blood, a traditional blue blood. And then he goes into this game and you see a pristine stat line, devoid of turnovers, 25 and 10. I think you're looking at a guy who's all-American caliber. That's why I wanted to choose this one. Am I crazy to say that he's at least top 15 player in college basketball? Because that's what All-American is. I know he won't get the notoriety that some do, but I think he could be at least a third-team All-American.
No, I don't think you're crazy at all. I mean, I'm pulling up his game log of what he's done so far because he's had several good performances. 15, 17, and 25, has had at least 8 assists in every game so far this season, Leif. Yes, as you said, had 9 turnovers in the UCLA game, but doing really, really well. And I think critically important too, because I thought New Mexico would take a bit of a step back losing JT Toppin, and they very well could, right? But so far, I've been really, really impressed by New Mexico, who I think will probably have their way with the Mountain West this season, and I'm excited to watch that. So no, I think Donovan Dent, especially if New Mexico as a team succeeds at that kind of level, and you got other teams like Boise State and stuff who will fight for that and contend for it as well. But if New Mexico continues to play at this level, Donovan Dent's going to be right there. I'm with you.
I mean, he's really good. I think they're going to beat St. John's if we want another hot take. I think he's going to win the Battle of Patinos.
Yes, man, that's going to be so good. Excited for that game. I'm looking through tonight's action Wednesday night. There's a couple, ranked teams in action. There's a bunch of games, nothing that's wildly good and exciting tonight. So, we'll see, because there's always going to be some kind of wildness. So we'll keep our eyes on that. Ken Palm's favorite thrill score game of the night is North Texas at Minnesota. That doesn't do much for me, Leif, if I'm being honest. And so, folks, we'll keep our eyes on Wednesday night and see what happens there. But yes, I am ready for that Patino on Patino action. That's going to be a really fun matchup and can't wait to see that. Folks, if you haven't subscribed to the show on video and audio, please make sure you do so that you don't miss a second of Locked On College Basketball, where we're bringing you college basketball 5 days a week. Great stuff. If you haven't joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, we'd love to have you there, where we're popping off all the time. I've been in that Discord most of the morning today, talking college hoops with everyone already, and would love for you to join us there. The link is in the show notes, and it's absolutely free to join. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats. And until tomorrow, when our guy Andy Patton will be right back with you. Peace.